Yet even in death, Ordrock's corrupted heart endured.
Hey, what's up, fellow gamers? It's BC from A7 Video, and I finally finished playing through Runic Games Torchlight 2, so you guessed it, it's time for me to give you one of our patented gamer category reviews for Torchlight 2. So, if you're not familiar with Torchlight or its sequel, let's sum both of them up as dungeon-crawling, loot-mongering role-playing games in the spirit of the Diablo series. Torchlight 2 takes the original one dungeon, one town concept. It continues its story with an interesting twist. It also enlarges its world to include an overworld map and multiple dungeons to explore, and it also sustains the already addictive combat and loot mongering. So that basically sums up the game. With that in mind, let's jump into what different types of gamers may experience when they play Torchlight 2. Okay, so for you action junkies out there, if you played the original game, the real-time combat is just as action-packed and chaotic as you remember. If you're like me, though, and you played the original on Xbox 360, don't trip out. The keyboard and mouse configuration could not be more simple and responsive to crab claw guys like me and any of you out there that fall into that same category. Now, I will say on the critique side that one of the downsides to the combat, and it really fleshes out in Torchlight 2 because it's a longer game, is that the combat over time does get really repetitive. That's not to say that it's not visceral and fun. It is, but after several hours, you'll start to feel the fatigue of, I've kind of already done this 100 times. Okay, bookworms, Torchlight 2 is not going to make any apologies for not crafting an award-winning story. The focus here is on dungeon crawling, acquiring loot, and leveling your character. There is a coherent story here that's very simple in its delivery, but just don't expect it to be groundbreaking. But interestingly enough, I wish more RPGs would take a page out of Torchlight 2's playbook. So many RPGs lose themselves in failed attempts to tell a really deep story. I'm telling you right now, I will take simple and coherent over something like Final Fantasy XIII's nonsense any day of the week. Alright, explorers, so Torchlight 2 is a bit more focused than more open world RPGs, like Skyrim for instance. But as the story progresses, a total of 3 distinct areas will be made open for you to explore and fight enemies. Now there's not a ton of discovery in those areas, as most of them in the game are connected to the story and made available only when you've progressed to that part of the story that allows you to explore those areas. And Torchlight 2 really cares more about throwing you into dungeons where you'll fight hordes of monsters and snag their loot than it does giving you a huge overworld map to explore. Alright, next up we've got builders. So those of you that keep up with my reviews in this channel, you know that I am very strong in the builder category without a doubt. Unfortunately, this is the part of the game where I feel Torchlight 2 lacks a bit. I wasn't put off by the very simple approach to leveling, applying my skill points and then qualifying to use better equipment. I was put off by how the game hamstrings you in delivering this very simplistic system. There were skills you couldn't acquire until you leveled well past the levels needed to beat the game. I get that the developers were trying to find a way to incentivize play beyond just the main game, like New Game Plus and online mode. So they had to, you know, kind of keep some things away from you so that you're incentivized to keep playing for hours on end. And I respect that, but I just wish that it didn't come at the cost of hindering those of us that wanted to experience all that the game had to offer in terms of leveling and developing characters by just playing through the campaign. You know, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go through the campaign and quest a little bit. I still would have liked to have gotten some of those more advanced skills, but I couldn't do it because the game doesn't really allow it unless you're willing to put in those extra hours of play. Alright, so extreme strategists will probably either need to avoid Torchlight 2 or at least go into it knowing that there's really no strategy necessary at all to win the game. Success in combat all comes down to your stats and your gear being better than the enemies you're facing. Alright, so for you collaborators out there, it's really rare when any type of game motivates me to play its online multiplayer for any extended amount of time. But Torchlight 2's formula works extremely well in online multiplayer. Whether you're playing with friends or even with strangers, it's a lot of fun to play. Now, I played with strangers, and if you mix this with my comments about the builder category, if you are also a collaborator who's a builder, you're in for a treat because you're going to be motivated to keep playing beyond the point where I kind of stopped. You know, I played a little bit of multiplayer just so I could have enough experience to review about about it, and I'll probably go back and play some more. But if you are a builder and a collaborator, not just someone who prefers to just play through the campaign like I was, I think that mix of the online play and the extended content will bless you enough for you to enjoy the builder category more than I did. Alright, so for you audiophiles and you visualists out there, the visuals in Torchlight 2 are extremely basic in design. The textures aren't deep. This isn't, you know, Skyrim, as I said earlier, but it's well executed in terms of color and lighting schemes. It's a very pretty game to look at. The soundtrack is also on point from start to finish. Alright, so let's talk bottom line. Torchlight 2 is an excellent, if very simple game. And if I had to focus on one critique, it would definitely be the repetitive nature of the questing and the combat. And it's much more pronounced in Torchlight 2 because it's a much longer game than the first one. So that repetitive kind of nature of the game in the first one, the game kind of ran out of play before the game wore out its welcome. Here it doesn't balance it quite as well because it's a longer game, but rest assured, you're going to have a good time playing it should you decide to do it and should you fall into the categories that I think would enjoy this game. And even with that gripe in mind, for me, I still managed to have a great time playing it. So, if you like dungeon crawling RPGs with a very simplistic approach, you'll not find much better on the market. And that's going to do it, folks. Please remember to like and subscribe and all that jazz. Leave me some commentary if you've played the game. And also, I'll have a link in the video description that will tell you how to get through my playthrough. I actually did a Let's Play for the entire series, so feel free. If you feel like you didn't get quite enough detail here, you can watch me play through it and cuss at the screen. Well, I don't really cuss, but yell at the screen for, I think, 26 episodes. So, until next time, friends, until all are one, this is BC signing off with another category review in the books. Until then, folks, peace and Godspeed.